The Gilded Age of American ambition, a tumultuous era carved out by sheer will and the relentless pursuit of wealth, finds its most enduring and perhaps most complex symbol in the dynasty of the Astors. Their story is not merely one of accumulating colossal wealth, though that they did with unmatched ferocity, but a profound narrative about the very architecture of American high society, the ruthless mechanics of its real estate boom, and the hidden emotional cost paid across generations for a legacy built on fur pelts and Manhattan soil. To understand the Astors is to understand the birth of the American aristocracy, not of blood and ancient titles, but of cold, hard capital and its almost inhuman foresight. The foundation of this empire was laid not by a pedigreed gentleman, but by a German immigrant from the insignificant town of Waldorf, a man named John Jacob Astor. He arrived in Baltimore in 1784, a time when the ink was barely dry on the treaty recognizing American independence, bringing with him little more than 7 flutes he intended to sell, a rudimentary grasp of English, and an ambition that bordered on the messianic. The narrative often simplifies him as a mere fur trader, yet John Jacob Astor, as he soon became, was a capitalist of the most elemental and visionary kind. The fur trade, particularly the lucrative pelts of the beaver, was his brutal, volatile, and necessary stepping stone. He plunged into the wilderness trade, navigating the dangerous politics of the frontier, the British and French influence, and the sheer logistical nightmare of moving goods across a vast, untamed continent. His American Fur Company, established in 1808, was a monopoly ruthlessly executed, controlling the supply routes from the Great Lakes to the Pacific Northwest, establishing the short-lived Astoria in the Oregon Territory, a testament to his almost imperial reach. But the true, lasting genius of John Jacob Astor lay not in the wild landscapes of the frontier, but in the muddy, rapidly expanding grid of Manhattan Island. Even as he was amassing fortunes from the far-flung wilderness, he was methodically, almost obsessively liquidating his fur assets and pouring every cent into New York real estate. This was not a passive investment, it was a deeply sophisticated, almost predictive move. Astor saw what others did not: the inevitability of the city's growth, the relentless surge of immigration, and the finite nature of Manhattan's landmass. He bought tracts of land far north of the developed settlements, areas that contemporaries mocked as useless countryside, always securing the fee simple title, ensuring the land and its future appreciation remained unequivocally his. He rarely sold, he leased, a strategy that ensured a continuous, compounding stream of income perpetually tied to the city's economic vitality. He became the landlord of New York, a silent partner in the destiny of every new immigrant, every soaring skyscraper, every bustling street. By the time of his death in 1848, John Jacob Astor was the wealthiest man in America, his estimated net worth, largely tied up in Manhattan dirt, placing him among the most successful capitalists in history. He left behind a fortune secured by ground rents, a monolithic, inescapable legacy cast in stone and mortar, establishing the family as the foremost landlords of the metropolis, and setting the stage for the dramatic, often scandalous, lives of his descendants, who would inherit not just the money, but the immense, crushing weight of its expectation. The sheer scale of John Jacob Astor's fortune, solidified in the unshakable foundation of New York real estate, presented his heirs with both an unparalleled privilege and a crippling burden. The first to grapple with this monolithic inheritance was his son, William Backhouse Astor Sr. Unlike his audacious, risk-taking father, William was a methodical, almost invisible custodian of the wealth. His genius lay not in creation, but in rigorous, relentless consolidation. He embraced the role of the ultimate landlord, overseeing the vast acreage of Manhattan, diligently managing the ground rents, and further purchasing strategic parcels that cemented the family's dominance. It was William who ensured the fortune's survival through the turbulent mid-19th century, turning his father's speculative holdings into an institutional, seemingly perpetual asset. He was the quiet, necessary accountant of the dynasty, dedicated solely to accretion and maintenance. However, with the passing of William Backhouse Astor Sr. in 1875, the unified, singular nature of the Astor fortune began its inevitable splintering, reflecting the changing cultural landscape of America. The wealth was divided primarily between his 2 sons, John Jacob Astor I and William Backhouse Astor Jr. This division, though strictly financial, was also profoundly philosophical, setting the stage for 2 divergent branches of the family, each destined to embody a different facet of the Gilded Age's aristocracy. John Jacob Astor I, the elder son, inherited the mantle of responsibility and traditionalist high finance. He was serious, deeply conservative, and focused heavily on maintaining the family's immense financial integrity, often engaging in philanthropic ventures and acting as a staunch pillar of the established New York social order. But it was his younger brother, William Backhouse Astor Jr., and perhaps more importantly, William's indomitable, fiercely ambitious wife, Caroline Webster Sherman Horne Astor, who would truly define the family's impact on American culture. This is where the story shifts from mere capital to the creation of codified, exclusive high society. Caroline Astor, known simply to the world as the Mrs. Astor, possessed a social ambition as fierce as John Jacob Astor Sr.'s. She recognized that in America, unlike Europe, titles were absent, and therefore social power had to be invented. She systematically constructed a rigid social hierarchy centered around herself, creating the legendary list of the 400, the exact number of people who could fit in her ballroom, symbolizing the absolute pinnacle of New York society. The Astor's wealth gave her the platform, but her iron will and impeccable, though ruthlessly enforced, etiquette gave her the crown. She wielded social exclusion as a weapon, determining who was in and who was perpetually out, thus elevating the Astor name from a mark of mere immense wealth to the unchallenged seal of social royalty. This era saw the Astor's brownstone mansions on Fifth Avenue become less like homes and more like fortresses of social power, physical manifestations of the walls Mrs. Astor built around her coveted circle. The pressure to conform, to uphold this manufactured social perfection, began to place an immense, often destructive, psychological weight on the subsequent generations, a dramatic conflict between private human desire and public dynastic duty. The next generation saw the Astor name take a sharp turn from the staid conservatism of William Backhouse Sr. to the flamboyant, often scandalous public life epitomized by Colonel John Jacob Astor IV. Born into the apex of the social royalty created by his grandmother, Mrs. Astor, he inherited the immense fortune and the stifling pressure of its reputation, yet he possessed an independent, restless spirit drawn to technology, luxury, and the grand public gesture. While the previous Astors were known for owning land, John Jacob Astor IV became renowned for defining the landscape of modern American hospitality and luxury. The pivotal moment of this era was the transformation of the family's Fifth Avenue brownstones into the monumental Waldorf-Astoria Hotel. The internal family drama played out directly on the most prestigious real estate in the city. William Waldorf Astor, John Jacob Astor's cousin, and a deeply estranged figure from his family and the confines of American society, first built the Waldorf Hotel in 1893 on the site of his former mansion, partly as an architectural act of spite against his Aunt Caroline, the Mrs. Astor. John Jacob Astor IV, in a move that recognized the new democratic direction of American wealth, responded by building the Astoria Hotel adjacent to it. Though fierce rivals, the Mrs. Astor's son, William Backhouse Astor Jr., brokered the famous agreement to connect the two buildings with the Peacock Alley, merging them into the singular magnificent Waldorf-Astoria in 1897. This hotel was more than a commercial venture. It was a societal earthquake, tearing down the restrictive, private social walls established by Mrs. Astor and replacing them with a public palace where the new, dynamic wealth of the nation could mingle, dine, and flaunt its success, a symbol of the transition from the private, aristocratic Gilded Age to the public, democratic, progressive era. However, John Jacob Astor's life was also marked by personal rebellion and public scandal that rocked the foundations of the established New York elite. The most egregious challenge to the family's carefully curated image of propriety came in 1909 when he divorced his wife of 20 years, Ava Lowell Willing, and then 2 years later married the 18-year-old Madeline Talmadge Force. The age difference, the rapidity of the remarriage, and the rejection of the strict social code infuriated the moralistic New York society, including his own family. John Jacob Astor IV and Madeline were effectively ostracized by the very 400 his grandmother had established. This social shunning forced the couple to flee America for an extended honeymoon tour of Europe, a dramatic public exile from the society his ancestors had defined. Their return journey in 1912 aboard the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic tragically cemented the Astors' place in popular historical memory. John Jacob Astor IV, the wealthiest man aboard, and a symbol of the very American excess and ambition that built the great liner, behaved with stoic grace during the disaster, ensuring his pregnant young wife was placed safely in a lifeboat before retiring to the smoking room, where he perished. His death, a dramatic public end for one of the world's most recognizable figures, solidified a romantic, tragic patina on the Astor name, simultaneously cleaning the slate of the recent social scandals while irrevocably linking the dynasty to one of the 20th century's most poignant historical events. While the Astors of the American line were grappling with public scandals and the dramatic demands of a burgeoning democracy, the other major branch of the dynasty, descended from William Waldorf Astor, the man who built the original Waldorf Hotel, chose a path of deliberate retreat into European aristocracy. William Waldorf Astor, the great-grandson of the founder and cousin to John Jacob Astor IV, possessed a deep, bitter alienation from American society, finding its emphasis on raw commerce and its lack of traditional deference profoundly distasteful.
He viewed his American heritage and the relentless social climbing of his Aunt Caroline, the Mrs. Astor, with unconcealed disdain. In 1891, William Waldorf-Astor made the decisive, symbolic break, relocating permanently to England and declaring that America was not a fit place for a gentleman to live. This was not just a change of residence, it was a profound cultural statement. He systematically disposed of many of his most visible American assets, including his Fifth Avenue mansion, and dedicated his immense financial resources to establishing himself as a member of the British elite. He purchased Cliveden, a magnificent country estate on the Thames, and Hever Castle, the former home of Anne Boleyn, pouring money into their restoration, clearly signaling his aspiration to legitimacy through historical association. His financial power, however, remained his most potent tool. He leveraged his American fortune, still primarily derived from the ground rents of Manhattan, to purchase and fund the Pall Mall Gazette and Pall Mall magazine, using his media influence to support the Conservative Party. This sustained political engagement, coupled with his vast wealth and prominent land ownership, eventually earned him a peerage. In 1916, he was created Baron Astor, and then in 1917, Vice